Bitcoin getting crushed again. It is now off 16% since
since
hitting all-time highs earlier this month.
But the bank also pointed to tens of billions of pounds in extra savings by households who have not been able to spend, but at some point could be unleashed. Another much-needed shot in the arm.
Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to another episode of Focus on Finance. In today's episode, we're talking about banking. Joining me in the studio once again, Niazi Hoolash, an accountant, and Shameem Jamal Ahmad, a missionary based in Mauritius. Assalamu alaikum. As before, we've spoken to members of the public and we asked them about their concept of what a bank is and what a bank does. Let's hear what they had to say.
Moi, comme je fonction en la banque, c'était ramasse casse. God casse, nous aller, nous déposer nous l'argent là-bas, les plus safe et nous gagnons l'intérêt, enfin bien minime si. Pour moi, c'était ça fonctionne la banque, mais la banque il a beaucoup de fonctions lui-même.
La banque il a pour ramasser un investisseur qui est dans Maurice et les bons comment dire tout le monde met de casse les plus safe qui nous mettent de casse dans la banque. De place, comment dire, nous payons nos casses à la maison même. Et nous payons plus l'intérêt, comment dire, et plus c'est pour nous.
Et la banque, c'est quoi dire, quand la fin du mois, quand on finit de gagner ce salaire, ça là. Il ne faut pas garder la cale, mais il doit sur la banque, une place bien safe.
La banque aide nous à gérer l'économie personnelle et aide nous à fluctuer. Et il permet de nous faire un saving pour le présent. Et même pour le futur, par exemple pour les futurs enfants, etc. Parce qu'il ne faut pas connaître qui va arriver plus tard. Si vous mourrez, bien sûr, la banque là, il peut saisir l'argent. Mais il vaut mieux vivre dans le présent, nous profiter, nous faire les fluctuer pour construire l'avenir.
En effet, la banque a plusieurs fonctions. Une des bonnes fonctions que nous connaissons, c'est qu'ils sont capables de mettre des savings là-bas. Okay, là-bas, les plus sécurisés et aussi les donne une facilité comme e-banking, une bonne facilité comme juice, une facilité comme loan. Et la banque aussi, comme un guide, il est capable de guider un peu le projet côté financement.
Déjà, la banque, c'est un stock d'argent qui tout citoyen a la possibilité de stocker de cash. Okay? Premièrement aussi, la banque assure la sécurité en termes de finances, mais aussi la banque c'est aussi par exemple un petit qui est dans le besoin, il est capable de demander par exemple un prêt la banque, il est capable de demander un service aide avec la banque, qui est capable de gagner sa aide là.
So, a wide range of very knowledgeable comments from members of the public about banking, what banks do. They're a store of money, they lend money, and they even give investment advice. But perhaps let's go back to how banking started. Earlier, in an earlier interview, I asked Danyal Arif this question. How does banking work and how did it begin? Let's hear his interesting history of banking.
So to know how the banking system works, I think we need to travel back in time. So the origin of banks dates back to antiquity, but obviously in the 12th century in the north of Italy or Northern Europe, you find numerous banks as well. So the function of a banker is especially devolved to money changers who are accustomed to handling hard cash. But no system was as successful as that of the London goldsmiths in the middle of the 17th century. At that time, coins were struck in precious metals, gold and silver. But gold quickly showed its limitations because of its heaviness and the fact that it was risky and impractical to walk around with, right? So everyone realized that it wasn't practical. So the goldsmiths, they offered to keep the gold safe in their vaults, and the depositors received in exchange a bill of exchange, which was a receipt bearing the signature of the goldsmith, who promised to return the amount inscribed in gold upon request, right? So everyone realized that these pieces of paper were handy, and they ended up being used instead of gold for everyday purchases. So as a consequence, at the same time, goldsmiths noted that only a small proportion of deposits were withdrawn. So as a consequence, they began to produce more bills of exchange than there was gold in their vaults. So they started lending sums in excess of their reserves, while also charging interest on the bills. So today the system is a little bit different because it has become more and more technologically sophisticated. But the trust in bankers is absolute. The system of what we call central banks and fractional reserve has become the dominant one worldwide. So this expression of fractional reserve refers actually to the way the modern banking system works. It is a system in which gold has been replaced by what we call base money. So this money is created only by central banks, and laymen, you and me, do not have access to it. Bills of exchange have been replaced by virtual money. This is created by commercial banks, the banks we all have a bank account with. So in modern economy, most money takes the form of bank deposits. And whenever a bank makes a loan, it simultaneously creates a matching deposit on the borrower's bank account. So they are creating new money when money is lent to the customers. So the money lent to customers is actually created out of nothing. And it is just a question of a few taps on a computer keyboard. So it used to be, they used to create money with the stroke of the pen. Now it's just a question of a few taps on a computer keyboard.
So a very interesting answer from Danyal Saib, from goldsmiths to money being created out of nothing. We touched on this in the money program, didn't we, Niazi?
Yes, we did indeed, Shafique. And I particularly like the way that Danyal Arif Sahib explained in very clear terms the evolution of banking and how they create money, etc. And when I hear what he said, I cannot help but try and focus on the future. If it has been evolving this way over the years, what is next? So, and while I think the world evolves, while it is very clear that banks are creating money out of nothing, and if you marry that to the fact that there's no such thing as a free lunch, then who is actually paying for it? And I think this is something people need to reflect on, especially people who go out, and credit is so easily available. You can go to a bank and get money fairly easily. If you provide security, banks either give you without security or with security. With the security in the current times, you're not so sure what the future is made of, how stable the economy will be. Are you not taking an unnecessary risk if you're leveraging too much or taking too many loans, in simple terms? So I think that is something that is worth thinking about. And it goes back to me that if this has evolved so much, it shows that banks have been very skilled at tapping to the very nature of humankind, that of greed, that of wanting more. Add to that social media or media in general, advertising, they create those wants in people. And what are wants or desires, eventually over time, people confuse it as their needs. And this is what has helped this whole thing, this whole bubble, if I may say, grow. So where matters stand today, I think the world ought to watch the next bubble, in my view. And the future will tell us about that.
To add on that, Shafique said, I think this reminds us of what we've been talking about, the importance of man to realize that we should live according to our means. And this is one of the basic tenets of Islam, that you should see what you're sending for the morrow, what you're sending for tomorrow. The bank today, as we've just heard, they have been given the permission to create money out of nothing. But man cannot live out of nothing. We should think and we should reflect whether really what the facilities, that the bank are offering us to invest in all kinds of comforts, all kinds of luxuries, whether we need them, do we really need them, and can we really afford them, or is it something just like a time bomb that will eventually face the consequences, or if not us, then our children?
And probably to react to what Murabbi Shameem Saib is saying as well, if you think about it, at the end of the day, you've got the banks who, on the basis of relatively no effort, are able to create money and get money in form of interest. And on the other hand, the common people who have to work and make an effort to be able not only to get the money to repay the bank, but also to live their own lives and progress in their lives. So already there's a dichotomy in terms of effort, which is extremely lopsided towards the bank. So no wonder people are complaining about the inequality between a very small portion of people owning a huge portion of the wealth in the world. I think banking has played a key role in that. So yes, there have been advantages, which are undeniable, but it has also created some stark problems. And that is something I think worth pondering over.
Yeah, certainly food for thought. Thank you for that. Also, we spoke to Dr. Wasim Khan on the subject of banking, and he had some interesting viewpoints as well. He also started with the history of banking. Let's hear what he had to say.
So the origins of modern banking go back, as your previous speaker, Danyal Arif Saab, has stated. That's where they start out with the Smiths doing what they did. But fast forward to where modern banking is today. Banking has taken on a very different role from what it originally started with. So originally it started with was basically a facilitator, a depositor who took deposit and then gave loans out. So it facilitated the flow of the money among among those that needed the money and those that had surplus money to lend the money. But then banking over the years started to move in different directions. And today, banking performs a very different purposes. Banking not only does, which is part of the commercial banking, which is essentially where you go in and you open a current account or a savings deposit, you deposit your money, and the bank takes that money based on the fractional reserve system, as you said, lends it to someone else who needs that money. So that's a basic part of it. But banks have also gone into investment management, where they're investing people's money in different asset classes, taking a fee and giving them back their capital and of course a return on that, hopefully. It doesn't always work, but that is the expectation. That's a performance function. Banks also go into investment banking in the sense that they underwrite new issues of shares of companies that are floated on the market. They do the same thing for debt securities, for example, bonds and so on and so forth. They're underwriters for those things. Banks also facilitate investment in private firms. They help private firms to take investors' money to invest in private firms to improve those firms and to increase their businesses. So there's a whole gamut of things that the banks have gone into. The thing that the banks have gone into, which is the more riskier part, is what we call as the derivatives, whereas there's no underlying transaction. It's a paper transaction. And that's where the risk is. If you recall back in 2008, when we had the financial crash or the financial issues problems, it started from debt securities based on mortgages. So these securities were basically backed with mortgages, but by themselves, they had no intrinsic value. They were paper securities. That's when you saw some of the big icons of Wall Street fall down. Now, this is exactly the problem with the banks, that they take risk to make money by going into areas where there is no underlying economic transaction, there's no underlying economic activity.
What are the main functions of a bank?
Banks will take deposits from individuals, they'll take deposits from companies, they'll keep a certain portion and utilize that money to provide a loan to those individuals who need the loan in the shape of a mortgage, in the shape of buying a refrigerator or a television set. Some people have even borrowed money to go on a holiday. The banks will also provide money to companies so that these companies can increase the capacity, install new plant and equipment, hire more people, increase the capacity to produce more. So they generate more jobs and generate more income for the society at large. So this is the basic primary function of the banks.
Can banking operate without interest rates?
Islamic banking is a pure form of banking that functions in a pure Islamic economic system. Unfortunately, the conventional economic system that we are currently living in, which is based on capitalism, puts too many restrictions in the pursuit of Islamic banking. Riba, interest rate or riba, is banned in Islam, but it's also banned in other religions. And most people do not know that. Riba in Islam is banned for usury or usurious purposes, which end up destroying families and societies. So in the Holy Quran, in Surah Nisa, chapter 3, verse 130, it says very clearly, and for practicing usury, which was forbidden, for consuming the people's money illicitly, we have prepared for the disbelievers among them painful retribution. If you look in the Psalms, which is from the Bible, which also says, take thou no usury of him or increase, but fear thy God, that thy brother may live with fear. So basically, interest rate is forbidden from a religious angle. Unfortunately, interest rate is an important factor of the current capitalist economy. And not just interest rate, but the compounding of the interest rate, which is pretty much, occurs in the economy. But that's how the current economy functions.
What are some of the latest developments in banking?
So the latest development in the banking world are that banks are going away from the very basic functions of taking deposits and lending money. So there are banks out there that don't even perform that function, but they're still called banks. And these are financial institutions that provide different services, especially in the investment management side or investment banking side or side of trading derivatives and securities and so on and so forth. So they don't even perform this basic commercial function of taking deposits and lending money. And it seems that more and more banks now, with society becoming a bit more cashless in the sense in some of the bigger economies where, as I alluded to earlier on, the use of plastic money or credit cards or debit cards, where all you need to do is to, in the UK now, if you up to £100, if you are buying something, you just tap your debit card or credit card and the transaction goes through. You don't need to carry notes and coins around to do that, right? So banks are moving more towards providing this. We touched upon cryptocurrencies earlier on, and these are digital currencies that don't exist in the shape of coins or paper or anything else. Governments are now thinking of introducing digital currencies through their central banks. And these digital currencies will be electronic currencies in a sense, where they will be used to replace the notes and coins to some extent, and be used to buy your daily bread and pint of milk and all of that stuff. They can be used then. They will be electronic. So how will they be used? They'll be used through these credit cards. So this is an element, and the banking system will have to play a very big role in facilitating the use of these digital currencies to the consumers, as it just did with the notes and coins.
So some interesting points there from Dr. Wasim Khan. He ended on digital currency that governments may introduce.
Indeed. I think it was somewhere to be expected, because the fact is, whether Bitcoin is a currency, is not a currency, depending on various definitions, the fact of the matter is Bitcoin cryptocurrencies do present a challenge to traditional banks and to governments. So it is inevitable that for certain advantages, governments through central banks would have come along and have their own digital currencies. I think the good side of it is that since it will be backed by a central bank, there will be the store of value aspect, which will be more secured for the users. But I think we're talking of plastic money, etc. The other thing to watch out for, the next big move, is going to be around mobile money as well, whereby it's not just plastic. Increasingly, the devices we use, these things are highly powerful. Okay, you've got the things of near-field communications, etc. And this is also a big competitor to the card companies, which are related to banks as well. So it's a very dynamic state of things, a dynamic industry. And ultimately, I think the approach or the solution that will prevail, or that will keep evolving, are those types of solutions whereby it is convenient for most of the people. The technology exists today, and you probably know it, is that people can pay for a retina scan. They can go to certain places, they have a scan of their retina, and the payment is made. So these are the technologies which exist today, which are not yet mainstream, but which will be coming very fast.
So an interesting view of what's to come. I think it's time to draw to an end on this program. I wanted to revisit a certain interesting part of Danyal Arif's interview earlier on banking, where I again asked him whether most people understand that the banks are creating money out of nothing. Let's hear this part of his interview.
Yeah, how those bank deposits, as I said to you, are created, new money is created, is often misunderstood. So the principal way is through commercial banks making loans. And the logic of modern banking and finance was actually, if you think about it, was born out of a betrayal of the trust of depositors by the goldsmiths. So that proves that economic issues are, in the end, a question of morals.
So, a moral aspect? Any comments?
Actually, to conclude, Shafique said, any system, be it the banking system, be it the economy at large, if the Islam teaches us, if at the core of the system there is no morality and justice, then this system is bound to fail. Anything which is sustainable, this is a core principle of the Holy Quran. Any system which we want it to last it should have justice as, you know, the driving force and morals. So Danyal Sahib rightly said that if we, you know, we distance ourselves from those values, we will face problems like we are seeing today, and we will have to come back to the values that religions have been teaching us for years. And this is where we'll find a system which will be more just and equitable for the human being at large.
That's an excellent place to end this program. So Jazakallah, Shameem, Jamal, Ahmad, Niazi Hoolash, and our interviewees, Danyal Arif Sahib and Dr. Wasim Khan Sahib. And thank you very much for your kind attention in this program of Focus on Finance, and we hope to see you in future episodes. Assalamu alaikum.